Call this meeting of the City of Salem Urban Renewal Agency to order. If the recorder please call the roll. Please.
Board Member Kaiser? Board Member Anderson?
Likewise.
Board Member Nanke?
Here.
Board Member Leung?
Here.
Board Member Osick? Absent. Board Member Hoy?
Here.
Board Member Cook?
Here.
Board Member Lewis?
Here.
And Chair Bennett?
Here. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Includes the minutes for the May 28, 2019 draft Urban Renewal Agency minutes, and that is it.
Okay. That's great. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. We're going to open a public hearing on the fiscal year 2020 Salem Urban Renewal Agency budget.
The Urban Renewal Agency will now hold a public hearing to receive testimony on the fiscal year 2020 budget. The hearing will be conducted with staff presentation first, followed by other interested persons. Individuals testifying are limited to 3 minutes. A yellow light will appear at the podium when 1 minute remains, and a red light will appear when your time has expired. Please conclude your testimony when the red light appears.
Your city manager.
Yes, members of the Urban Renewal Agency Board, the public, I'd like to, it's my pleasure to introduce Bob Barron, the City and Urban Renewal Agency's Chief Financial Officer. Bob will be making the brief staff presentation this evening, and I'll have a little bit more to say about Bob during the City Council meeting. Thank you.
Great. Well, it's my pleasure to introduce the public hearing for this fiscal year 2020 Urban Renewal Agency budget. Following the public hearing, the staff recommends that the Urban Renewal Agency Board deliberate and then approve the Budget Committee recommended budget. This budget is shown as Attachment 1 in your meeting agenda package, along with any changes in order for the staff to return on June 24th, 2019 with a resolution to adopt the fiscal year 2020 Urban Renewal Agency budget. Please note, at that meeting, staff may request the agency board to amend the fiscal year 2020 budget approval made this evening to include any rebudgeted purchase orders or carryover projects from the current fiscal year 2019 budget, which the staff is currently identifying. The Urban Renewal Agency Budget Committee recommended a budget to the agency board on May 8th, 2019. The agency board is required to hold a public hearing on the recommended budget, and in compliance with state public budget law, this evening's public hearing was noticed in the Statesman Journal on May 29, 2019. Thank you.
Very good. Do you have any insight? No one said or something? Oh, okay. They say one. No one signed up to testify on the urban renewal budget. I'll just leave it open for a second if anyone wants to get up and testify on it. All righty. Any questions for staff? Councilor Anderson.
The cliche is there are no stupid questions, so I'm going to test that by asking what could be viewed as a stupid question. I'm looking at the bond debt, and I see every one of them but North Gateway ends up with an unappropriated ending balance. So we spent more, looks like we spent exactly beginning balance and revenues equal the expenditures. So what happens if we want to do more in North Gateway? It may not be that stupid because you have to look to somebody else to give the answer.
So, Kristen Rutherford, Urban Development Director, and there are kind of two parts to your question.
Okay.
So I'm asking Renee if she could come down. I do. To speak to part of it, particularly the part about the bonded and the ending fund balances, and then I can speak to what we do if we want to do more.
Hi, good evening. Renee Fraser, Urban Development. So in North Gateway, we planned for the possibility that the maximum indebtedness would not be increased, and we would have more money in the debt fund than we needed to repay all of our debt, and so we would have to return everything back to the tax assessor that wasn't used on debt.
Now, to answer part two of your question about what do we do if we want to do more in that urban renewal area, we have just passed the substantial amendment that is now effective. So we can now continue collecting our tax
We
increment.
increase the indebtedness, or the potential.
Yes, our maximum
yeah.
indebtedness.
Okay,
Yes,
great.
yes, we have
Thanks.
more money to use.
Then we know what to do with.
Oh, we know what to do with it.
So you're not going to answer question number 3? Is this a stupid question?
It was an
I
excellent.
think that's been answered.
Very good. Any other questions? All righty, I'm going to close public hearing. Councilor Hoy, do you have a motion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Good. I was looking for somebody with a motion.
I'll do my best.
Thank you.
I move that we direct staff to return on January 24th with a resolution to adopt the fiscal year 2020 Urban Renewal Agency budget as drafted.
Second.
June 24th.
What did I say? I meant June.
Second.
January.
Okay. Who's second? I did. You did. Okay, thank you, Councilor Cook. Any discussion? Councilor Anderson.
Apparently, there's no such thing as a stupid motion either.
All righty.
And the gloves
That
are
will
off.
vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion passes. And I see no further business. We are adjourned. Call this meeting of the Salem City Council to order for Monday, June 10th. If the recorder could please call the roll.
Counselor Kaiser? Present. Counselor Anderson? Likewise. Counselor Nanki? Here. Counselor Leung?
Here.
Counselor Osick?
Here.
Counselor Hoy? Here. Counselor Cook?
Here.
Counselor Lewis?
Here.
And Mayor Bennett?
Here. Very good. Any additions or deletions? No. Okay. Council, city manager comments. Councilor Nanki.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was privileged to, and we renamed it while I was there, to the Mayor Pro Tem Smile at the Countrywide Financial Relay last Saturday. And I used to run the quarter mile in high school as well, and it's a hard race, and these kids put everything they had into it. It was wonderful. I was much appreciated to be sought after to lead that again. I did it maybe 15 years ago.
Good.
And,
Keep fit.
Darn right.
Let you run that for me on a regular basis. Anyone else? Councilor Lewis.
Yeah, I want to bring this up at the MWAC meeting last Thursday, June 6th. The discussion about the retrofitting of the Center Street Bridge came up, and I'm going to quote from Director Chickering, Sonny Chickering, of the director of this region's ODOT. He said 3 times, 1, 2, 3. The Oregon Department of Transportation sees the retrofitting of the Center Street Bridge as one of their main priorities, and they will get it done.
Right.
When asked about, well, what about the $40 million that is now apparently owing, he said the same thing over again. The Oregon Department of Transportation feels as though it's their responsibility to get the Center Street Bridge updated, and it will happen. So I figured that was good news. I just wanted to share.
Very good. Wanted to call your attention to the brochure on your desk. I'll be hosting an event Thursday from 4 to 6 p.m. at the Salem Convention Center, celebrating the donation of a really modern Chinese masterpiece to the city of Salem. But I have Heather Dimke here, or Imke is here, who's been doing this, so I'm going to call on Heather to kind of explain what's going on with this.
Okay, thank you. My name's Heather Dimke. I'm with the Public Works Department. Yes, I have been working with a gentleman from China who has, through an acquaintance, quite graciously offered to donate a painting to the City of Salem. This painting will be from a very well-known artist, Master Li Wuzhou, from China, from Beijing. So they are donating the painting this week. We are celebrating this donation through a reception over at the Convention Center, and that's Thursday the 13th, 4 to 6 p.m. We will have some hors d'oeuvres. There will be music from a string quartet, and other paintings from Master Li will be shown at that time. So if folks are available, this event is absolutely open to everyone in the community. It's really quite an honor that we are receiving this donation. So please come out and celebrate with us. Yes.
Just wondering, where is that painting going to eventually be placed?
I think we are still determining where it might be placed. There's space in here. There might be space in the mayor's office. I think that's still to be determined.
If the mayor moves out. No, it's good. Thank you very much. Heather and Linda Rosen, my staff have just done great work on this. I really appreciate, plus a whole bunch of other folks have been really involved in the community as well as on city staff, and really appreciate the work you've done. This really is quite an honor. I think these paintings are currently, one of them is at Buckingham Palace. They made a gift of this to the Queen, which I thought was kind of interesting too. So, and Salem, who knows? Okay, Tom, did you?
No, I didn't have a comment. Mr. Mayor, I just was wondering if Courtney could close the curtains. I was having trouble seeing the person when they testified.
Ah, okay. Very good. Okay, we'll go to Councilor Young.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to mention that I went to the Battle Creek Park Master Planning meeting. That was last Wednesday. It was a really great meeting and an opportunity to actually see what some ideas are being proposed for the park development. I strongly encourage folks who weren't able to attend that open house to go online and fill out the online survey that is now live and available for the community. There's also supposed to be 2 additional open houses. I believe there's one in September and one in November. And they're going to be presenting at this week's South Gateway Neighborhood Association.
Great, thank you. We've all been looking forward to that for a number of years now, so it's really exciting to hear the master planning is underway. Very good. I'm going to move on then to proclamations. First one is, I'll just say here.
Use this one.
Thank you. This is proclamation regarding Salem Alley Days. And I wanted to invite up Linda Nishioka and Jackie Heavey and Hazel Patton. Gail and great. Give you this proclamation. There you go. We'll have everyone introduce themselves at a certain point here. the proclamation reads, whereas Main Street programs offer effective tools for revitalizing and encouraging economic growth within historic downtowns, fostering local pride and maintaining community character while enhancing livability. And whereas the Salem Main Street Association was formed in March 2016 as part of the National Main Street Program in order to promote preservation based on economic development and increase community pride in Salem's downtown. And whereas Salem's Main Street Association would like to proclaim the summer of 2019 a celebration of Salem Alley Days, which will include events celebrating the history of Salem's downtown alleys on first Wednesdays and On Your Feet Fridays. And whereas Salem's local businesses have rediscovered Salem's downtown alleys, and residents and visitors enjoy the pedestrian-friendly historic nature of these segments of Salem's downtown streetscape, and whereas Salem's Main Street Association is interested in giving residents and visitors an opportunity to provide input on naming the alleys during the summer Salem Alley Days celebrations in order to further develop and celebrate Salem's vibrant historic alleys, enriching their sense of place as a vital and central part of Salem's downtown. Now, therefore, I, Chuck Bennett, Mayor of the City of Salem, do hereby proclaim summer 2019 as a celebration of Salem Alley Days. Yay. And with that, I'm going to call upon the residents of Salem to recognize this special observance and try walking in an alley once in a while. And this is dated the 10th day of June, 2019.
Thank you. This is the design committee from Salem Main Street Association, and my name is Linda Nishioka.
I'm Jackie Heavey.
Hazel Patton.
Carol Long.
Gail Calderoso Doty.
Paul Goodwin.
Ron Steiner.
There's Karen. So what are the events? Tell us a little about
Okay, great. So first off, on behalf of everyone at Salem Main Street Association, a big thank you. This is all volunteer, and city staff has really gone above and beyond to help this Salem Alley Days proclamation happen. Just like all over the United States, our historic downtown alleys are being activated by local businesses. At times there's been food trucks and music and vendors, and Salem Alley Days and this naming effort is just going to continue to support what's already happening. So Salem community, we want to hear from you. June 14th kicks off the public input and then the voting process to name our historic downtown alleys. You're going to be able to log on to the Salem Main Street Association website, find loads of historic information about our downtown and our alleyways, and then offer your suggestions. So this is placemaking for us and by us. And thanks again. There's so much passion for historic downtown Salem, and happy Salem Alley Days.
Thank you.
Let me see your ivories over here. Ivories over here. I got you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
Security risk has been
Well, just to add to the sense of vitality going on here in Salem, I want to go ahead with the Salem Brewery District Proclamation and want to invite up Jake Bonham, owner of Salem Ale Works, Jim Weinman, owner and founder of Vine Valley Brewing, and Donnie Rissanen, owner and founder of Vine Valley Brewing. Not you, it's Jake.
I say no, Jake couldn't make it today. Okay. So we have a couple of breweries.
Oh, great. Okay, excellent. Excellent. Okay, whereas in 2016, Oregon breweries contributed $4.49 billion to our economy and created more than 31,000 direct and indirect jobs, as well as attracted 19 million visitors to the state. And whereas the Salem Brewery Association helps promote the interests of area breweries and increase awareness of locally produced beer, the association also provides support and mentoring to new up-and-coming brewers. And whereas Salem's craft brew industry has expanded exponentially the past several years and is now home to 12 breweries, and whereas 6 of the 12 breweries are located within a 1.5-mile radius of each other in southeast Salem, and because of proximity, brewery operators desire to coordinate marketing and events and increase connectivity between the 6. And whereas to best organize events and programs, increase awareness for Salem breweries, and support walking connectivity, the 6 breweries wish to further strengthen their bonds as businesses by providing future wayfinding signage to those who wish to visit breweries in the southeast Salem cluster. Now, therefore, I, Chuck Bennett, Mayor of the City of Salem, do hereby proclaim June 10th, 2019 as the official formation of Salem Brewery District, and call upon the residents of Salem to recognize this special designation dated this 10th day of June 2019. So congratulations, guys. This is great.
First off, I'd like to introduce myself. My name's Jim Wyman from Pine Valley Brewing, and then I'll get the other guys from a couple other breweries in the district to introduce themselves as well.
Ian Croxall from Santiam Brewing.
Jim Smiley, also from Santiam Brewing.
Dan Maletta with Ratchet Brewery.
Donnie Risden with Pine Valley Brewing.
And I just had a little quick word. First of all, we're very happy to be here today, and we all love being a part of the craft beer industry, especially the craft beer industry here in Salem. With the creation of the district, we aim to foster industry growth, and in turn, I believe that will further economic growth within our district. We also are excited to help the City of Salem with further plans to create a more pedestrian-friendly route with walking and biking connectivity to each brewery located in the district. I would like to thank the mayor and everyone that helped us from City Council, and we are very passionate with our partnership to further our awesome city. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We need a pedal bar.
Yeah.
Okay, I have one more. June is Proclamation Month. I'm going to declare. This is Pride Month, and I want to invite down several people to receive a proclamation regarding it. Daniel Rawlings with Salem Parents and Friends of Lesbian and Gays, President and member of the city's Human Rights Commission. Pam Trezevant, President, Capital Pride. Bill Kay, founder of the Gay Men's Social Group of Salem. Dr. Glenn Kurtz, treasurer of PFLAG, the Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays, Salem board members, and Katie O'Neill and Sally Edmonds, PFLAG board members and parents of LGBTQ children. There you go. Okay. Whereas city values include that Salem is open and inclusive to all, including LGBTQ communities, and is committed to supporting their dignity and equity, and whereas many of the residents, students, city employees, and business owners within the City of Salem who contribute to the enrichment of our city are part of the LGBTQ communities, and their contributions to our capital city can be seen in their widespread academic, political, economic, artistic, and social participation in the community, and whereas the City of Salem remains committed to protecting the civil rights of all people in an effort to forge a more open and just society, and uses our Human Rights Commission as a vehicle to that means. And whereas cities, states, and agencies across the United States recognize and celebrate June as Gay Pride Month, and it has become a symbolic month in which the LGBTQ communities and their supporters come together in various celebrations of Pride. And whereas the City of Salem recognizes support and advocacy groups within our community, such as Capital Pride, Human Rights Commission, LGBTQ Rights Task Force, PFLAG Salem, Rainbow Youth, Gay Men's Social Club of Salem, Salem Lavender Women, and Salem Transgender Support Network as contributing organizations that embody the essence of the 1969 spirit that was felt at the Stonewall 50 years ago this month. Now, therefore, I, Chuck Bennett, Mayor of the City of Salem, do hereby proclaim June 2019 as Pride Month and invite everyone to reflect on ways we can all live and work together with a commitment to mutual respect and understanding while furthering acceptance and diversity in our community, dated this 10th day of June 2019.
I'm Daniel Rawlings, the PFLAG president, and also your newest appointment to the Human Rights Commission.
I'm Dr. Kirks, and I just wanted to thank City Council and everyone involved that has made this proclamation possible.
I'm Sally Edmonds, and I'm a new member to the PFLAG group, and I'm just so happy to be here, and thank you so much for this proclamation.
My name is Pam Trezevant. I'm the current president for Capital Pride, and last year leaving. Somebody else will be doing that soon. But thank you very much, Mayor Bennett, and thank you for opening up our Capital Pride event last year. It was the first official that decided to come join us, so this is real important, but as he stated, the 50th anniversary of Stonewall. So for us, it's a big year, and we celebrate here in Salem in August. So hey, if you're free on the first Saturday, come out to the park and have some fun.
My name is Bill Key, and I'm here representing the Gay Men's Social Club of Salem. I would like mainly to thank the council members for voting to recognize Pride this month. This is very meaningful for all of us, not only in terms of recognizing that we exist, but that we are contributing to the diversity of our city, and also working to provide support for members of our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay. Now give me just a second here to get back my fabulous assistant, the city attorney. Okay, this is an opportunity for the public to comment. We allow 3 minutes to address the council on issues on the agenda this evening, other than public hearings. You have, as I mentioned, 3 minutes. At 2 minutes, an orange light will flash. At 3 minutes, a red light goes off, and please stop talking. Just stop, because I'll be the noisy one asking you to stop if you don't. Susan Smith.
Good evening. My name is Susan Smith. I live in the Fairmont Hills neighborhood, and I just wanted to comment on 3.3C, our Salem project. First of all, I congratulate you for undertaking this effort. I think the work that's been done is magnificent. I do want to address where we go from here. I think it's extremely important that we proceed in a timely way to do both climate action planning as well as perhaps a retrospective analysis of our trends. We don't have to wait for trends. It's critical to my children, it's critical to our grandchildren. This is the issue that we all need to put front and center and really focus on and get this done. One thing that I would suggest in that is that we also include, in addition to mitigation and in addition to ways to reduce our emissions, that we need to have a broader effort that includes our adaptation efforts. Because there's a lot of work we're going to have to do with respect to our water, many, many things. So I want to make sure that when we do this planning, we do a strong job on mitigation planning, but also on adaptation. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Any questions? Yes, Councillor Cook.
I wanted to thank you for coming down, Ms. Smith. I do have some questions for you in regards to our Salem and the climate action plan. What are the actionable steps that you're looking for out of both the climate action plan and from the Our Salem project?
Well, I think the things that are most important are creating a city that has transportation options that are available other than solo trips in cars. I think that's very high. The other thing that is excellent is the work with respect to complete communities. To the extent that we can make compact, complete communities, we can reduce vehicle miles traveled, and those are very important. We're in a wonderful position because with the providers of our electricity, we have a naturally declining decarbonization of our electricity. And so one of the things that, for instance, we can consider is how do we get people switched off of natural gas back onto electricity? Fuel switching is a very expensive thing to do for homeowners, and we may need to figure out how we can help homeowners along with PGE and Salem Electric to go ahead and get fuel switching done. I didn't mention, but I am the person who is the principal author of Willamette University's Climate Action Plan draft, and I'm working with other folks on doing climate action planning, and I've offered to your staff to provide any help that you need. I think you already have some Willamette University professors involved, and let me assure you, we're there to help and make this a successful effort.
Okay, any further questions? Great, thank you very much. Okay, consent calendar, Councilor Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move approval of the consent calendar with the following polls: 3.2C by Councilor Anderson, 3.3C by Councilors Hoy, Lewis, and Anderson.
Second.
All right, the consent calendar includes the May 28th, 2019 draft City Council minutes, proposed fiscal year 2020 master fee schedule, support for establishing a continuum of care for the Mid-Willamette Valley region is item 3.2B. Item 3.3A is an intergovernmental agreement with the Salem-Keizer School District for police services for the 2019-2020 school year. Item 3.3B, agreement with the Rotary Club of Salem for constructing a new performance facility at Riverfront Park. 3.3D, reappointment of David Hiddle as Municipal Court Judge Pro Tem. Item 3.3E, reappointment of Ron Hellewell as Municipal Court Judge Pro Tem. Item 3.3F, intergovernmental agreement with Marion County for communication and dispatch services for the 2019 St. Paul Rodeo. Item 3.3G, federal transportation funding allocated for the Salem-Kaiser Area Transportation Study. 3.3H, collective bargaining agreement between the city and 911 Professional Communications Employees Association. And that concludes the consent calendar.
Very good. Have a motion, second, any discussion? Councilor Anderson.
Just a general one on the proposed master fee schedule. I'm sure it's very complicated and complex, and I know the staff has done a good job at updating items, and I would just hope that the fees we are charging are actually commensurate with the amount of staff time and program time that is spent on these, and I hope they are. And if they're not, I'd like to discuss this a little bit with staff at some future time.
Great. Thank you very much. That's a very good point. Anyone else? Okay, all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Okay, I'm going to open the public hearing for the purpose of deliberations on the Unified Development Code update for A. Bryce.
Good evening, Mayor. Just a real quick recap. On May 13th, you had a public hearing to consider the proposed amendments. There were 4 main issues were identified. They dealt with the keeping of bees, bike access standards for bike parking areas, criteria for the city's acquiring a property that may be encumbered by easements or other encumbrances, and then finally the requirements to submit a grading plan for land division applications. Staff took a further look at the amendments, and as identified in the report, we made changes to the beekeeping standards, the bike access requirements, and the provisions for the city acquiring encumbered property. We didn't make any changes, however, as identified in the staff report, to the grading plan requirement, because we think there's such an important element to the developing property. So that's it.
Okay. Any discussion? Councilor Anderson. Well, let's get a motion. Sorry.
I move that we engross ordinance bill number 6-19, amending the Unified Development Code and other chapters of the Salem Revised Code, and advance it to a second reading as engrossed.
Second. Second by Kaiser. All righty. Councilor Cook, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Bennett. I just wanted to thank you, Bryce, for your work on this and just connecting with the State Beekeeper Association. This is an issue that is close to home in my ward for a lot of residents. So I appreciate you having that eye with how it affects neighbors who maybe don't make that same choice, and how this can be very accommodating for people making different choices as well. So I wanted to thank you. My hat's off.
Thank you.
Councilor Nagy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question for Public Works Director regarding the ability now of said director to accept encumbrances in regards to, and I'm assuming it's BPA, because that's the one that folks were here talking to us about. Is that like an automatic acceptance in your mind?
So there are, there could be a very large number of encumbrances, so in right-of-way. So the best practice is to accept right-of-way without any encumbrance. However, there are examples such as this BPA issue where there's some difficulties presented by the agency. So this change allows us to then be able to make exceptions, on an as-needed basis. But so the short answer to your question is yes, it will allow us to do that. The longer answer, we'd prefer not to.
Sure. If I can follow up on that one briefly, because it says this has always been in place as well in the staff report. What have people done when they wanted a road they needed to give to the city for development? What have they actually had to do? Because
under BPA?
Under BPA lines, yeah.
So what has caused us concern here is the requirement for a 30-day notice. So in essence, BPA could show up and say, get your stuff out from under our lines in 30 days. That is a new topic that's come up. What we intend to do is, once this issue is passed, the developers are obviously under economic pressures to complete their project. We intend to sit down with EPA and say, hey, how can we make this work better? Obviously, there's roads crossing under their rights of way everywhere.
Yeah.
So how can we make this work? Because clearly a 30-day notice when there's roads, when there's pipelines, is ridiculous. So, but we'll get this signed off, move along and then see if we can work cooperatively with that agency.
Excellent. Thank you.
Is this retroactive then, the change BPA made in their 30-day notice?
I don't think so. I mean, we haven't gotten, I see Dan reaching for his microphone. I haven't received any notice that says it's retroactive, but clearly for this development, the agency has said, they've forced inclusion of this 30-day notice.
So this issue we heard about is resolved at this point?
This issue is resolved.
Okay.
Yes.
Councilor Anderson.
A follow-up to that, related to what the mayor said about the issue that was at the last public hearing. At that time, I think, at least I was inclined to go with the staff recommendation as opposed to what the developer was asking us to do. But it seems like what has happened here is you've made some movement to satisfy the concerns of the developer while still leaving the control in the hands of the city and the Public Works Department, albeit in conjunction with BPA. Is that a fair reading of what is done here? In
that is correct.
Change? Okay.
That is correct.
That's a good deal then.
Yes, it is. Thank you, Councilor.
Anyone else? Oh, Councilor Anderson.
Thank you. Bryce, this is on the bike parking standards. We had a little discussion this afternoon in terms of there's two issues that I see in the amendments. One, it relates to curb cuts and how people don't have to take their bikes over the curbs. And I think it's a good idea where you don't necessarily have to make curb cuts every place because there are driveways that are adjacent to where people are going to be taking their bikes. And the other one was about hooks on either the wall or the ceiling. And I think the concern was how are people who are riding their bikes downtown to do shopping or do this and that. Hooks are a problem, while it may be a different situation in mixed unit developments where somebody is parking their bike who lives there. If you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So if you look at the standards in Chapter 806 for bike parking, the first kind of place you need to put them is outside of the building within 50 feet in a convenient distance. If you cannot provide them outside, then we allow for the opportunity to put them inside. And then if they're inside, it would probably be unlikely that a person would be able to accommodate, staple racks on the ground because they would just take up a lot of space. So they would look for a more efficient, means of putting them on, ceiling racks or wall racks. But the first place you're always going to look to put them under the standards is outside the building. And for most of the projects we've seen, in the downtown, it's only the tenants that that are living in the residential mixed-use projects that are living in the building that are using bike rooms where they have racks on the walls or the ceiling. Then the other spaces that are required for like ground floor commercial tenants, those tend to be located in the public right-of-way, like in the furnishing zone in the streetscape. So if you're a short-term user, you're going downtown to shop, to eat, and you're riding your bike, there's a place outside of the building in the right-of-way that you can just get off your bike, lock it up, go into the establishment, and you're good. Now, if you work in the downtown or if you are living there, then you're likely to see more of a rack on the wall or the ceiling to accommodate the bike parking.
And those kind of the latter kind of racks we're talking about, they're going to be inside the building,
yes,
which also would lead to a little bit more long-term security for parking overnight or all day during the day.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right.
Okay, very good. Any other questions, comments? Okay, we'll go ahead then with the motion. Did you give me a motion? John, this one? Okay. Now close the hearing. Just go ahead. Just give me a motion. Okay, all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed, motion passes. Okay. Okay, I'm going to open a public hearing on state revenue sharing funds.
The City Council will now hold a public hearing to receive testimony regarding state revenue sharing funds. The hearing will be conducted with staff presentation first, followed by other interested persons. Individuals testifying are limited to 3 minutes. A yellow light will appear at the podium when 1 minute remains, and a red light will appear when your time is expired. Please conclude your testimony when the red light appears.
Again, Bob Barron with the Office of Finance. Following the public hearing, staff recommends the City Council's adoption of Resolution 2019-14, which is in your agenda package following the staff report. This is a resolution electing to receive a share of certain revenues from the State of Oregon's general fund. In order to receive state revenue sharing funds, the city is required to hold 2 public hearings. The first public hearing to discuss the possible uses of the state revenue sharing funds was held by the Budget Committee on May 1st, 2019. And then this evening's public hearing, which covers the proposed uses of the state revenue sharing funds, which was noticed in the Statements Journal on May 29th, 2019. The proposed use of state revenue sharing funds in the amount of $1,890,680 as recommended by the Budget Committee is an offset to the cost of providing police patrol services.
Okay. I have no one from the public signed up. Any questions for staff? All righty. Councilor Hoy. I'm going to close the hearing. Councilor Hoy. Give me a motion.
One moment, please. I move that we adopt Resolution 2019-14, electing to receive a share of certain revenues from the State of Oregon General Fund.
Second. Okay. Very good. That was in fine print, too, huh? Okay, any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Open a public hearing on the fiscal year 2020 City of Salem budget.
City Council will now hold a public hearing to receive testimony regarding the fiscal year 2020 City of Salem budget. The hearing will be conducted with staff presentation first, followed by other interested persons. Individuals testifying are limited to 3 minutes. A yellow light will appear at the podium when 1 minute remains, and a red light will appear when your time is expired. Please conclude your testimony when the red light appears.
Again, Bob Barron, Office of Finance. This is agenda item 4C, public hearing on the fiscal year 2020 City of Salem budget. Oregon public budget law requires the Budget Committee to recommend a budget to the city.
Stop now.
I'm going to stop you.
Who's going to correct him?
Oregon.
Oh, you know, they taught me that my very first day here, and I'm so sorry. Oregon.
All right.
Public budget law requires the Budget Committee to recommend a budget to the City Council, which it did on May 8th, 2019. No changes were made by the Budget Committee to the City Manager's proposed budget, provided as Attachment 1 to the public hearing staff report. The City Council is required to hold a public hearing on the recommended budget. Notice of this evening's public hearing was published in the Statements Journal on May 30th, 2019. Following the public hearing, staff recommends the City Council deliberate and approve the Budget Committee's recommended budget within the restrictions provided in law, which are 2. Property taxes cannot be increased from the state rate levy from the rate levied by the Budget Committee, and no funds expenditure can be increased by more than 10%. Now, within these restrictions, the City Council may make changes to the recommended budget. Possible amendments are shown in Attachment 2 and is provided as a supplemental information report for the City Council. Following deliberations on the budget, the City Council is asked to approve any changes to the budget this evening to allow staff to return with a resolution to adopt the budget on June 24th, 2019. At that time, staff will ask the City Council to amend the budget approval made this evening to include any rebudgeted purchase orders or carryover projects from the current fiscal year ending 2019, which staff are currently identifying, as well as any other appropriation needs that were not identified during the budget review process, but remain within the 10% cap prescribed in the budget law. A complete list of items to be included in the fiscal year 2020 budget will be provided to the City Council with the agenda package for the June 24th meeting.
Thank you. We do have folks who have signed up to testify on this. Phil Carver.
Good evening, Mayor Bennett, council members. My name is Phil Carver, and this is an official comments from the 350 Salem group. Thank you for holding this public hearing. 350 Salem has been an active participant in the city's adopted strategic plan, in its completed greenhouse gas inventory, and in actions to update the comprehensive plan, the Our Salem process. 350 Salem has contributed policy advice and technical assistance on all three processes. The existing strategic plan calls for developing a climate action plan after completion of the greenhouse gas inventory. The Our Salem process will develop long-range plans for housing and zoning, but is not a substitute for a broader, short-term action plan. A climate action plan is a plan for actions. There seems to be some confusion on this. It is a plan that is goal-oriented and prioritized for measurable actions. The next steps are to hire a consultant to summarize a range of possible climate-related actions, and second, to provide for public involvement, including a broad-based and inclusive citizen steering committee. There's a wealth of options already outlined in the active climate plans and actions of similar-sized cities in Oregon. We're the only similar-sized city that does not have a climate action plan. Many of the possible actions will involve only small or negligible budget impacts in future years. Smart actions to adapt to climate changes could save the city millions of dollars. The process can be started this fiscal year with a budget of $50,000 to hire a consultant. We thank Councilor Anderson and other council members who have expressed support for this expenditure. It is now clear we are in the midst of a climate crisis. The scientific evidence linking greenhouse gas emissions with climate disasters is overwhelming. For Salem, the largest climate threats are likely due to increased storm intensity, drought, and wildfires. Salem can and should do its part to reduce emissions and prepare measures to adapt to a reasonable range of climate scenarios. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Yes, Councilor Cook.
Thank you. Thank you for coming down today, Phil. I have a couple of questions for you, and I want to thank you for your work with 350.org as well. What are the dangers of not following through with developing a climate action plan?
One of the dangers is that state and federal action are very likely. There's a bill, House Bill 2020, which is hopefully nearing passage for this legislature, and it will provide funds that the city could use to fulfill its climate action plan. But if it doesn't have a climate action plan, then it'll be last in line for these state funds.
And then also, is this the only way to do this work? We've heard from Susan and from yourself about the dangers with short-term effects of increased storms, wildfire. We heard from Ms. Smith about mitigation for transportation options, complete neighborhoods, these sort of things. Is there any other way to do that work, or does the climate action plan fulfill a unique niche?
I think it's a unique niche, and it can be coordinated and collaborate with the Our Salem process. I don't see a conflict there. The Our Salem process is focused on zoning and transportation issues, but there are transportation issues that will not be in the Our Salem plan, particularly electrification of transportation. How can the city, both city vehicles and community vehicles, more easily become fully electric? And it relates to charging stations primarily, but there are other elements. And so I think that it can complement the Our Salem process.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Lewis?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Carter, for coming down. I appreciate your involvement over the time. My question is, and you mentioned $50,000. Do you think $50,000 could get Salem a finished climate action plan?
Probably not. I think it's a good first step. I think it can create a list of actions. I think it can have a public involvement process. But I think the challenge is in fleshing out the actions and costing out the actions and assessing the effectiveness of the actions. I think that is a harder step. And for example, the storm runoff in Salem, as we develop more properties, it increases storm runoff. Well, what is the effect of that on Mill Creek relative to the storm damage? What's the effect of the SANEM control structure, and is that fully sound in a major flood? The 96 flood, there was some mismanagement of the water, and Rose Street was flooded, and there was some money paid to people on Rose Street because there's a lot of control structures within the Mill Creek drainage, many channels, Shelton Ditch, and so on. And apparently that wasn't operated correctly. At least that's a rumor I've heard. So I think there's a lot of things to do, but whether we can get a completed action plan that the city council could adopt going forward, I don't know if that can be done with $50,000, but we can make a very good start.
Follow up if I could. And I'll be asking staff later exactly what it would cost as far as consultant costs and staff time, but what I'm hearing from you is the sense of urgency. But tonight it sounds like you are more than willing to wait maybe years to have a completed climate action plan.
I wouldn't say years. I'd say another year after this year. So 2 years. So in the same kind of time frame as our Salem plan. About 2 years, I think, would be a reasonable time frame.
With no concerns about next year's budget and how that would have to affect finishing the plan. My question is, what I'm hearing from folks is the absolute need. In fact, it's been mentioned that it should be the top priority, but yet now what I'm hearing is there's a willingness to not do the plan, to just kind of bite at it, and I don't get that.
Well, I would prefer to have $200,000 and the staff and a fully funded staff position to manage the process, but this offer has been made in the spirit of compromise and to move forward.
Councilor Anderson.
Thank you, Phil, for you and your organization's work. One of the things you talked about, and it kind of relates to what Councilor Lewis was discussing, the need for some sort of immediate action. And at the Budget Committee, I made the motion that didn't pass, but my motion was to begin implementation of a climate action plan, which doesn't necessarily say, hire a consultant and spend that $50,000 directly on the consultant, but on something to demonstrate that we're moving forward with the climate action plan. So what are some sort of short-term, immediate things that you would think that we might do? I'll just give you one example. We're trying to get solar panels installed on the library when we build the library. So what other things could the city do that might have, that would not cost that much, but would have some immediate demonstration that we're moving forward?
I think one item could be electrification of some of the city's fleet. And I think another is to provide employees with electric charging stations if they pay for parking. I hope that they pay for parking. I had to pay as a state employee. That's a good transportation policy, but to provide charging stations for employees so they can get to and from their house and with an electric vehicle if they don't have the range to go back and forth.
I'm going to call up Mina to talk a little about our fleet. And I will tell you, we are in the process of setting up an entire electric avenue in town set up for this kind of. So these things are actually underway rather than prospective.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. Go ahead,
Hi,
Mina.
Mina Hansen, among many hats, fleet director. We, in our fleet, have looked at electric vehicles. EVCs for are just local traffic The dilemma is the overwhelming majority of our fleet falls into 3 categories: fire engines, police cars, and very large public work trucks. In the current evolution of electric vehicles, there are not reliable choices for fire engines, police cars, or large construction equipment. We do actively look for and purchase, when it's available, biodiesel for our vehicles. We maintain them in very good working order to reduce their emissions, but we're just in that situation where the overwhelming majority of our vehicles are not light duty over the road, they're heavy duty vehicles.
Thank you very much. Anyone else want to ask Bill a question? Okay. Do you want to ask Phil a question?
I do.
Okay.
If that's okay. Thank you.
No, yeah, go ahead.
All right. I believed you mentioned, Mr. Carver, in your testimony about the potential of missing out on state matching funds or for state grants if we didn't have an action plan in place. So my question is in regards to that. I know Portland and Eugene, similarly sized cities or larger cities in Salem or in Oregon, have climate action plans. Do other cities of smaller size also have climate action plans that would also be competing on that field? I'm trying to get a lay of the land, because if everybody has a plan, and that is definitely going to be a requirement, I'm trying to suss that out. Or if we are not unusual, there are other cities like Redmond or Bend or other cities that also don't have climate action plans, that maybe a planning grant would be part of that.
Milwaukee has an active action plan, Corvallis has an active action plan, Ashland has an active action plan, and Bend is in the process of developing one. I think they're about a year into their process of developing an action plan. I don't know of other cities that have action plans.
And none of those plans are integrated like our Salem would be? They're all specifically labeled climate action plan, not a chapter as part of a larger long-term comp plan overhaul?
Many of them are integrated into their land use planning. Some of the departments have a sustainability department that oversees the planning activities as well as the climate action plan. So there's an umbrella. I think Corvallis and Eugene both have sustainability coordinators.
And do any of those cities also have resiliency plans integrated as part of their climate action plans? I know that's something the mayor has brought forward before, resiliency task force and whatnot.
I'm sorry, I don't know what the resiliency plans or activities of the other cities are.
Thank you.
Phil, I have a question. Is climate action plan kind of a label that is required in the law? We've had an environmental action plan here since 2006 and have sought grants and done a whole variety of things using that as part of our really directing the city, directing the community in certain direction. Does it have to be called climate action? Is that kind of what you're saying?
It's not in the bill. In House Bill 2020, it doesn't say, it has a list of priorities for the funds that are non-transportation funds. Transportation funds that are collected on roadway fuels have to be spent on roadways. That's in the Oregon Constitution.
Right.
After that, there's carve-outs. There's 10% for Indian reservations and tribes, the 11 recognized tribes in Oregon, or 11 or 12. And then there's money is focused on high-impacted communities that are low income or particularly affected by climate change and so on. So there's a list of priorities, and there's several governing boards or advisory bodies that are created by the law that would then guide the process, and the money would then be appropriated by the legislature based on the recommendations of these committees. So right now it's at a 30,000 or maybe 50,000 foot level in terms of the law and how it would actually be implemented. But it's pretty clear that a city that has greenhouse gas inventory and has an action plan that says this action will reduce greenhouse gas emissions this much in this way, I think that would probably get that city a leg up.
Okay. So as we look at our various plans which are associated with environmental action, we would need to also evaluate those in terms of the availability of funds if 2020 were to pass. Is that how it would work?
Right, and it'll be several years.
Not a thing where we have to put together something called the climate action plan in order to to qualify to even apply. That's what I'm afraid that might have been the way it sounded to me. Maybe I
But the
misunderstood.
activities that you have in a climate action plan would have to occur in a successful grant proposal.
Great.
It'd have to be targeted, it'd have to be demonstrated measurable,
Yeah.
emissions reductions, those kind of demonstration that it's not, that it's additional to other actions the city would normally take in its normal activities, those kind of things. So they're looking for things that have high impact.
Yeah.
I mean, that's my guess about how the process will work. The bill is very conceptual,
Yeah.
even though it's many, many pages.
Yeah. Great. Mr. Manager, I'd like to kind of understand how we are integrating the various plans we have around these kinds of issues. We did go through the gas emissions measuring process. Do we have, I'm concerned that $50,000 isn't going to buy what we need in order to become qualified for potential state money, and I want to understand kind of what's going on here. Are we prepared for passage of 2020 climate, a $50,000 thing we call a climate action plan, which clearly isn't, but how will that work? How will this come together?
Specifically in regards to the legislation that might pass?
Well, in terms of the legislation, I want to understand, will we have with $50,000, will we have a comprehensive or even a short-term climate action plan that would qualify it for state or federal money associated with this kind of activity?
I'm happy to speak to the climate action item among the issues that were discussed by the Budget Committee now or at the completion of the public hearing.
Okay,
However,
well, be ready, I guess. I'm real concerned because I think Phil raises a lot of really good questions. E.M. Easterly?
Mayor Bennett, members of the council, E.M. Easterly, Ward 8. Going to change the topic slightly. Our Marine Drive transportation request for fiscal year 2020 is basic. On May 8th, and again 2 weeks ago, I asked council to modify Transportation Project 71503 to permit purchase of Marine Drive right-of-way and adjacent bike and pedestrian path facilities with 2008 bond funds between Herritt Drive and Fifth Avenue. This request contradicts the staff April 22nd recommendation to first acquire Marine Drive right-of-way along Wallace Marine Park. I challenge that recommendation for 3 reasons. First, building a 3-block roadway along Wallace Marine Park will have 0 impact upon Wallace Road congestion. Second, acquiring the Marine Drive right-of-way along Wallace Marine Park is a complex process which was first outlined in the 1997 study. The subsequent recommendation to adopt 2 Marine Drive alignments was a response which the Congestion Task Force staff report acknowledged, but offered no solution package or timelines. Third, the expansion of Marine Drive right-of-way between Herritt and Fifth Avenue will allow local traffic access to the West Salem, Glen Creek commercial area and provide sooner rather than later Wallace Road congestion relief. In summary, the complexities facing acquisition of the right-of-way along Wallace Marine Park include 1, securing right-of-way across the federally owned Pioneer Village land. 2, developing 4F, transportation noise, social justice, and environmental impact findings. Resolve, and the 4th, the resolution of the taking of Wallace Marine Park land. This evening, I asked the council to redefine the scope of Transportation Project 71503 and asked staff to recommend acquisitions along Marine Drive between the right-of-way spine between Fifth Avenue and Herritt Drive during fiscal 2020. and change more of the sections of Marine Drive from red to green. This map was handed out to you a month ago during consideration at the Budget
Thank
Committee.
you very much, E.M. Okay, Councillor Lewis.
Thanks, Mr. Easterly, for coming down. But that map you just mentioned, I'd like to ask a question because I may have misunderstood what I heard. It shows on the map the area of the proposed, what's in the transportation plan, Marine Drive from Glen Creek to Cameo, and then it's turns. It's in pink, which says optional right-of-way. Are you saying now that that should not be considered for?
Absolutely not.
So you would not oppose Marine Drive starting at Glen Creek?
I would not.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Thank you, E.M. Raquel Moore Green.
Good evening, Mayor, councilors, staff, and community. My name is Raquel Moore Green, and for the last 23 and a half years, our family has resided in Ward 3. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to provide public comment tonight. This month, I conclude my 6 years of volunteer service on the Citizens Budget Committee representing Ward 3. It's been an honor and a privilege to do so. And tonight, I would like to comment on the fiscal year 2020 City of Salem budget, specifically Attachment 2, City of Salem Budget Supplemental Report from your City Manager, Steve Powers. And I'd like to quote, "Recommendation, approve the Budget Committee's recommended budget and direct the City Manager to prepare a budget resolution for consideration on June 24, 2019. Summary. Prior to recommending the fiscal year 2020 budget on May 8, 2019, the Budget Committee deliberated several possible amendments to the budget. None of the amendments received sufficient support to be incorporated in the Budget Committee's final recommendation. As a current Budget Committee member, I would like to reiterate the outcome of the committee's deliberations that evening. None, and I repeat, none of the additional spending packages were supported by the committee. All were voted no. Under the leadership of 2 mayors and 2 city managers, I have watched the proverbial budgetary cliff get closer and closer. It is evident that the city manager recognizes this as stated in the fiscal year 2020-24 forecast. And I quote again, "The disadvantage of the consistent rate of growth for property tax is its insufficiency relative to the rate cost increases for general fund services. Stated another way, a level of projected revenues lower than the anticipated gain in service delivery costs. The budget presented by professional staff recognizes we have reached the cliff and we must not continue to use working capital. The budget as proposed tonight by the city manager and recommended by the Citizens Budget Committee has already tapped into $4 million of working capital to balance the fiscal year 2020 budget. The citizens who serve on this committee, along with the city councilors and the mayor, voted to approve the budget as recommended. They did not vote to add any additional spending packages. My hope and my request to you tonight is that you have heard the recommendations and that you direct the city manager to prepare the budget resolution as recommended. John Latimer, Marion County Budget Officer, recently stated concerning the county's budget, due to our estimate of future resources and our efforts to maintain a structurally balanced budget, I have had to deny several worthy decision packages. I urge you tonight to lead the City of Salem in the same fashion, keeping the budget structurally balanced. Thank you.
Raquel. Councilor Anderson.
Thank you very much, Raquel. I really don't have a question. I just want to thank you for your dedicated service on the Budget Committee.
Thank you. It's been an honor.
You served as the chair one year and the vice chair, I believe, the year before that, and you provided a valuable perspective to the deliberations. So thank you for your service.
Thank you, Councilor.
Councilor Cook?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to thank you as well. I want to say Chair Moore Green. But I did have a question for you regarding the severity of the financial situation moving forward, as you mentioned, not just with the city, but with our region as a
Yes.
whole and cost of providing services. So in your testimony, you talked about that fidelity, maintaining that commitment with the vote, that these things did not move forward at Budget Committee, therefore they shouldn't move forward now. And 2 out of these 3 amendments, or I'm not sure how you would phrase them, they're both for funding ongoing programs that the city residents have. It would be breaking commitments to them. It's not about funding new programs. This is about a commitment that residents expect, not just a service level. So in viewing it through that lens, do you change your opinion, or do you still feel very strongly about
No,
this?
I feel strongly. We've already borrowed or taken from our savings account, the working capital, $4 million, and we were obviously overextended.
And is there any situation in which working capital would be an appropriate source to fund something until a broad and diverse revenue base could be found in your eyes, or is that something purely left for a safety net, as it were?
That's a very good question, and I think that's something that I perhaps would have considered had we even had a discussion about revenue. There was no discussion. We attempted to discuss it, and it just went nowhere. So that's difficult.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councilor Dinkey?
I'll be the last again. Since you're Ward 3 on the Budget Committee, thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
It's
Thank
been
you.
an honor to have you there representing Ward 3.
Thank you.
Councilor Lewis?
Yeah, thanks, Raquel. I too want to appreciate all the work that you've done over the years on the Budget Committee. I just want to make sure and give you the opportunity. It's not any of these 3 programs that you object to. It's the
No.
fact of the effect on the city's budget.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Raquel. Vanessa Nordyke?
Good evening. My name is Vanessa Nordyke, Ward 7, and I'm here to urge the city to adopt a climate action plan. I was born and raised in Salem. I grew up climbing trees, playing in Croyson Creek, drinking water straight from the garden hose. My friends and I rode bikes around the neighborhood. My family and I road tripped all over the state, taking in Oregon's rivers, mountains, streams, and beaches. Growing up, I thought Oregon was a paradise that would never, ever change. 30 years later, and things have changed. Among other things, the United Nations has prepared a report based on hundreds of international experts, thousands of scientific studies, warning of the risk of extinction of countless species. Much closer to home, you need only flip through the pages of the Statesman Journal or read the Salem Reporter to recognize the alarmingly high rate of per capita carbon emissions, as well as community support from a climate action plan. Now, I've mentored a lot of young people around the city, and something that I like to tell them is if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Eugene, Corvallis, Medford, Gresham, Beaverton, Portland. These are just some of the cities that already have climate action plans. In fact, the Statesman Journal reported that Salem is the only large city left in our state without such a plan. As a member of City Budget Committee, I seconded a motion for a climate action plan brought by Councilor Anderson. I believe that a climate action plan is a policy objective that is consistent with the city's strategic plan. But without actually funding a plan, without even initiating a little bit of seed money for a climate action plan, we are only left with an empty promise. Money is what transforms intention into action. Now, a plan does not need to be gold-plated to be effective, nor do we need to reinvent the wheel. One of the advantages of not being first is that we can take advantage of lessons learned. So we can and we should ask other cities what worked and didn't work. We can and we should ask where they found the most bang for taxpayer buck. We can and we should take the first step right here, right now. So please add my name to the chorus of voices in support of a climate action plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa. Councillor Lewis?
Thanks, Ms. Nordyke. I hope I don't pound on this too much tonight, but it sounds to me like you believe the City of Salem should have a climate action plan. But the amendment that was proposed in the Budget Committee was to put $50,000 towards a plan. It was not to get a climate action plan. So are you satisfied with dragging this out over the years? Because it sounds like what you're saying is this city needs a climate action plan now.
The strategic plan for the city recommends development of a climate action plan, and that is what I support. I also support the creation of seed money. I recognize that when it comes to the idea of developing a plan that involves multiple stakeholders, possible grant funding, consultation with experts, having that done, one and done in 1 year, is neither feasible nor desirable. I also know because of our budgetary considerations, it makes sense to me to start with a little bit of seed money. And as I said, there's no need to reinvent the wheel. There's no reason why we can't consult with other communities and find out where did they find the most bang for buck. So I am flexible on what that plan actually looks like. I believe that as a governing body, what you as a city council member can do is recommend and direct staff to take action on this. But in order to do that, you have to have a vote and you got to have a little bit of money to get started. The devil is in the details, and I think that is where governing bodies can work with city staff and outside expertise and informed members of the community to come out to what that plan should be. But if you want me to give you the precise details today, I can't do that. But I do urge the city to work with those who do have the clinical and scientific expertise to get this plan rolling.
Councillor Cook?
I wanted to thank you, Ms. Nordyke, for coming down as well and for your leadership on Budget Committee as well as Vice Chair. So thank you for that. I did have a couple of questions with the Climate Action Plan. Speaking with you before budget and also hearing your testimony tonight, it's come up that, as you said, if you don't have a plan, you plan to fail. And moving parallel to that, you can have many plans in which you never implement. So how much of this 50,000 seed money, as you call it, would be meant as the teeth to be able to have, instead of just the plan, the implementation? Or how that money was meant to leverage? You kind of alluded to some of that with the coalition or partnership. What role do you see the financing part of this climate action work playing in moving this plan towards implementation, these actionable steps that you're referring to? Just seeing how that would be different. I know this has come up previously with, we have a plan and then it sits on a shelf, as people say, or we go through a plan and then what happened with that, we don't know. So trying to get your take about how this investment of 50,000 may change that or may be critical for that.
So as I stated, I support a climate action plan as a policy objective. I'm not a climate scientist, but what I would recommend is that you partner with your city staff, outside experts, and informed members of the public. I believe that member input, public member input, will be crucial in terms of devising what details, where do we start, right? Isn't that always the question? How best do we start? How best do we use the finite resources that we have? And so I would recommend sitting down with all the invested stakeholders, holding a series of meetings as necessary to get that point across. But again, I defer to folks who have dedicated their professional educational training to understanding how best to spend every dollar of that 50,000, or however much that the City Council deems most appropriate.
Thank you.
I hope that answers your question.
Any further questions? Right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Steve Anderson?
Steve Anderson, 3240 Geller Road, Northwest in Salem. Mark Billman wrote, "The key to enjoying cooking is embracing simplicity. Simplicity in food is honest, warmth, modesty, even fairness. Simplicity in cooking is ease and grace. Simplicity is not compromise, but a treasure." When Jesus visited Mary and Martha's home, both loved him and wanted to show that love. On this occasion, Mary expressed this love by hearing one word, while Martha expressed hers by serving him. Jesus did not dismiss Martha's concern, but instead redirected her focus by saying, "Choose the good part." The Congestion Relief Task Force recommended moving forward on Marine Drive. They gave City Council two choices. We are asking the council to keep it simple and choose that good part by instructing staff to, 1, choose Fifth Avenue alignment to provide the spine for this multimodal local access circulation. 2, start with right-of-way acquisition first at Fifth Avenue. 3, complete the process of turning red to green in the map that we have shown you. This is cost-effective. It will promote economic development in our community, including multifamily housing. It will aid in the development of Nueva Luz, a low-income housing project in Salem where we've provided money already. Their letter is in council's testimony file. It is not expensive. It's not the expensive road to nowhere. It's nearly half of the proposed project. This 5th Street alignment will not prevent revisiting the Glen Creek alignment later proposed by and answered such by Director Fernandez. It makes a simple and good choice now. In 1997, the proposers of this multimodal local access circulation transportation project recommended 2 alternatives. Analysis at that time showed equally able, no difference in handling traffic, flow, and travel time. However, they recognized difficulties in the Glen Creek alignment. They identified several. They remain today, and even more, yet still not resolved. They stated in their recommendations that specifically an alternative alignment from that extends 5th Avenue northward along the UGB should be built if there are difficulties in constructing the preferred eastern alignment along Wallace Park. The language making 5th Avenue alignment as a preferred alignment is now included in the Salem Transportation Plan. We're asking you to choose the good part, keep it simple, choose the 5th alternative alignment for starting Marine Drive, turn red to green, and not this 3-block budget-busting road to nowhere. And as an aside, I support the Climate Action Plan motion before council.
Help me out just for a second, Steve.
Sure.
So you're for building some of it, buying right-of-way for some of it. You went very fast, and I'm sure it all made sense if you had time to read it and look at a map. But
Sure.
I want to understand, we're looking, I think, at a right-of-way purchase at this point is the recommended action. Mr. Fernandez, am I right?
That is correct, Mayor.
So are you saying move back from a right-of-way purchase strategy to a build part of it now and buy right-of-way? Is that kind of what I hear?
No, Mayor, the
Okay.
2 choices
What do you want us to do?
Okay, the 2 choices in the budget say start with right-of-way purchase at Glen Creek and
No,
then...
but what are you asking for?
I'm saying let's purchase right-of-way now,
Okay.
starting at 5th Avenue out to Herrick.
Okay.
Just the right-of-way purchase at that alignment.
How does that help the home you were talking about, the low-income housing?
Well, there's been conversation before the council as letting things develop as areas grow. By making a statement as council that we are going to purchase a right-of-way along this alignment, it removes the uncertainty to prospective development, and that allows development to start along that alignment. We get SDCs, monies, and that begins to flow naturally. If there's not this uncertainty about this alignment, but we're just got a 3-block session, that doesn't start. So we're asking to make it a commitment to a right-of-way that will start the process.
So the recommendation by staff for right-of-way is what you support?
Well, not the council, not the staff recommendation, because they want to start at Glen Creek, and then they say, have council instruct staff to do something different. We want you to do something different, start at 5th Avenue.
One of the pieces of testimony received seemed to me to indicate that the housing unit you were talking about, the group housing, want us to build the road by Herrick, not by right-of-way. They want a road because it's going to cost them 500 feet of asphalt if we don't.
I think first there is get the right-of-way secured. Whether you support building a road there to start with, that's a different issue. We think right-of-way purchase now is important.
But the benefit that they talk about is building the road for them. You seem to indicate that buying the right-of-way would benefit them somehow.
I think that will help them attract investors, whereas now, without that having that security or that certainty, they cannot attract investors, Mayor.
That's not how they presented it. I just
Well,
alert
that's
you.
my
Your
assessment,
for
sir.
them? Okay. Councilor Lewis?
Thanks, Steve, for coming down. I'm going to ask the same question. The area shaded in pink on the map that you referred to, that part of Marine Drive that would go along the boundary of the park and then head north. Are you opposed to that section of Marine Drive?
As we've talked, Counselor, I'm not opposed to buying the right-of-way there. I think I would wait to make the decision on design and construction until we've looked at how we resolve some of those difficulties and have a cost-benefit analysis. But I would say, as I said to you before, I believe that's in council's purview, and if you want to add that right-of-way purchase, I would say go ahead.
Okay, thanks.
Councilor Anderson?
Thanks for coming down, Mr. Anderson.
Yes, Anderson.
Let's go back to 1997, just so I understand. What you're saying is that in 1997, there were two alternatives. One would be Marine Drive to Fifth Avenue in that way. The other would be Marine Drive, then to the jog eastward, ending up at the east end of, yeah, that one down there, the one to the left, the pink one, not the green or the red one. And at that point, when the recommendation in 1997 was that the Fifth Avenue or Fifth Street alignment was the better one for a number of reasons.
The discussion, Counselor, was there was probably 4 or 5 alternatives under discussion. Mr. Fernandez was one of the young engineers on the project, and they came down to 2 choices to recommend.
Okay.
The eastern alignment, which is Glen Creek along the park, and then the Fifth Avenue. They said in that report that they liked the Glen Creek alignment first, as Councilor Lewis has brought up in the past. But they also recognized that there were several difficulties there, so they said, if we cannot overcome those difficulties on that alignment along the park, we would recommend and have the preferred alternative then become the Fifth Street alignment.
Okay, and without going into what the difficulties were, because
Right.
we've talked about them before, EIS, federal land, that kind of stuff. Have those difficulties been resolved today, 20 years later, 22 years later?
They have not.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions for Mr. Anderson?
Thank you, Council.
Thank you. Kathy Dewana?
Kathy Dewana, 1045 Fifth Street, Northeast in Salem, and I'm here to support the acquisition of right-of-way from Fifth Avenue to Harriet Drive and even up to River Bend as a priority in the 2020 budget. We've spoken many times before about the greater benefits and potential benefits, return on investment, the values along this corridor. Without repeating those, and Mr. Easterly and Mr. Anderson repeated many of those benefits. It's kind of hard to find, you know, after 17 times of testimony, what's an angle that helps us understand this? I looked to the goals behind our comprehensive plan, and I would say that if we commit to investing in this right-of-way, beginning at Fifth Avenue, going north, that we will be actually supporting, implementing many of our goals behind our comprehensive plan. And some of those restated easily: to accomplish the most desirable pattern of land use, taking into consideration transportation network, location of public facilities and utility systems, and the needs of the people, which are important to the creation and maintenance of a healthful and pleasing urban environment. To stabilize and protect essential characteristics of residential environments, including natural features. To permit multifamily housing developments to blend in the overall fabric of the Salem urban area. the provision of transitional land use patterns from urbanized core to the rural area outside the urban growth boundary, and provide a wide variety of parks, open spaces, outdoor recreation sites, which include, among other things, natural areas, connector trails, agriculture lands, and floodplains. You know, this project addresses numerous goals in our comprehensive plan, numerous plans behind the plans. I urge you to support the change recommended by Mr. Easterly and Mr. Anderson. Thank you very much.
Any question? Yes, Councilor Lewis.
Yeah, Kathy, thanks for coming down. I've got to say, after 10 years on the Planning Commission and 5th year on this chair, that one of the things that's important to the city is connectivity. And the proposal to start Marine Drive at 5th and Cameo does not connect it to anything except for that small area. On the other hand, the Marine Drive that connects to Glen Creek connects to the commercial area, basically the only commercial area in West Salem. So where is connectivity in your concern?
The Fifth Avenue connection, actually, we already own right-of-way and have streets that take people into Glen Creek. There can be improvements. People have recommended that we have a community action, a community involvement group to help in the design specifications going forward. But this creates the link, and it's a link that serves not just east of Wallace Road, but through other links in the plan, areas west of Wallace Road as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Charles Fong, and I'm in Sally Cook's ward. I was not planning on testifying tonight, but I feel like there's an elephant in the room, and therefore I feel compelled to speak, and that is regarding our water crisis last year, whereby we had the toxic algae bloom. And I think all of you will remember the level of disruption that it created in our community. And I believe that that is directly linked to climate change. And we are spending, I believe, $75 million to retrofit our water treatment system. And so compare the $50,000 I think that you've been talking about to the $75 million that is budgeted for that, plus the several $1 millions that it took to take care of the immediacy of the problem last year. And I would say that that $50,000 is a pretty good investment. So I just wanted to point that out, and thank you.
Councilor Cook.
Thank you. Thanks for coming down, Mr. Fong. I appreciate your testimony. So what I'm hearing from the heart of your testimony is shifting from being reactionary to being proactive, preventative, preemptive in these situations. So in looking at the work that's being done, and you talked about the 50,000 compared to the 75 million, what are you looking for to show that the city is being preemptive towards changes in climate and climate change?
Well, without really studying the subject, because I wasn't really planning on testifying, I would say that to develop a concrete plan that reduces our carbon output in any way that we can agree upon measuring it, and for example, the electrification of the fleet or something to that effect, is a positive step forward. And I do believe that the federal funding will reward the City of Salem for these types of collaborative actions.
Great. Follow up.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll make it quick. Thank you, Mr.
You go as long as you like.
Thank you. So in talking about the severity and the need in this area, and then also my role within the city, learning about the vastness, different departments, how areas can become siloed, do you see a targeted intervention being something that would be more effective, or are you looking for overall systems change, something more broad that affects, with this climate action plan? We've talked about the specific steps. We've talked about policy interventions, recognizing that you're not a climate expert, but really trying to get to the crux of this with preemptive work and what you're speaking to with this elephant in the room. If we've got further changes, it's been mentioned, wildfires, storms, flooding, how to be preemptive with those things, and instead of being as reactionary, how are you seeing that come into play?
Well, I would say that we probably would need to be a bit multitasking there. Clearly, we're going to have to be reactive. I mean, 2018, if you wiki it, was the most deadly and destructive wildfire season in the state of Oregon, so that's pretty clear. And all that is a reactive event. And when you get a fire, you got to put it out, correct? And minimize the amount of damage to the valuable forest land, as well as the damage to the businesses affected by the smoke, disruption to the businesses during the summer of 2018 in Southern Oregon was catastrophic. So, and I believe that didn't Detroit Lake lose a lot of money because of the issues up there? So I would say that on a micro level, that the reactionary measures are going to be needed, and I think they'll be pretty evident. As far as longer term on the macro level, I believe that there are many communities who are leading the best practices regarding climate plan, climate action, and actually those investments in infrastructure and upgrades to the green economy will probably be a net positive increase to our economy, our standard of living here in Salem. So I see this all as a win-win. I hope that's not too Pollyannish. Thank you.
You came in the right place if you're talking that way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further questions? Okay, that's it. Everybody who has signed up has spoken. You've spoken.
I haven't spoken to the budget, but...
Okay, come on.
I only want to address the budget.
Okay.
I just wanted to speak to the question of money and how you spend it. My recommendation, based on my experience with climate action planning, is if you want to avoid having a plan that sits on the shelf, you don't hire a consultant. What you do is you get city staff to do the job, and if you need more staff to do that job, get that staff and put them in Mr. Power's office, maybe a little desk next to his, and that's the way you get something done. The question about money is, obviously there was a sense that $50,000 would be a good way to go. If the city is really serious about this, I would say that you would do a 2-year temporary duration appointment of a climate action coordinator who would work with all of the department and division folks to develop a climate action plan and get short-term actions implemented in the next 2 years. Because I think Councilman Lewis has a very good point. We do need to do things now, but we also have to do planning. And so that's the way I would suggest the
Councilor Cook.
So you're talking about having it integrated within all of the systems of the city and our community. It's what it sounds like.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. All righty. I'm going to close public hearing on that. Now, at this point, are you going to make a motion? Move this forward to the city council. Now, what we're going to do with this is you have an opportunity to amend this motion at this point. This will allow you a chance, if you want to take things out of the budget, put things into the budget within the guidelines we've heard about. You can do that, and we will vote on each of those amendments separately. If that's okay with everybody? All righty. Councilor Lewis?
Yes, I have a...
What?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, we get to ask questions.
I thought he was going to make a motion. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Do you want to make a motion to...
I am, but this is...
No. Now's the motion time. You want to make a motion?
Well, actually, I am. I move that That the city council add the recommendations of the Downtown Advisory Board to the Council Revenue Task Force recommendations.
I'm gonna stop you for a second. What I need is a base motion that says move this forward to the city council to pass the recommended budget.
Oh, I'll let the council president do that.
Okay. Go ahead, Councilor Hoy.
Thank you, Councilor Lewis. That's very generous of you. I move that we recommend to the city council the budget as drafted in the staff report.
Second.
Yeah, that will be on June 24th, we'll take action, correct?
Correct.
That's what you meant? Yeah, okay. Second was? Lewis. Okay. Want to vote yet, or want to amend? Okay, Councilor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move we amend the motion to add an appropriation of $50,000 for a climate action plan to be used for immediate activities in implementation of a climate action plan integrated into Salem's strategic plan and integrated into our Salem.
Okay. Second by Hoy.
Yeah.
So can I ask questions of Anderson and of
You can ask questions, yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Just tell me what your question is.
So my question for Councilor Anderson is, through the discussion, the 50,000 seems a bit fluid. The face changes as far as if you want that to be the implementation work. I know we have a presentation later today on safer crossings. It's been discussed about how some of these connections could use leveraging partnerships. And then also we've talked about just the policy work and then the staff work. So my question to you is, if it's kind of wide open, if you see a narrow focus, to let us know where that is. And then my question for staff is the cost to be able to integrate this work into our Salem if the 50,000 is necessary.
Okay, here's my attempt at this. In the budget committee, I made the motion, and my original motion was to direct staff to hire a consultant. And we discussed it at great length, and I changed the motion. I either amended it or made another motion that would direct staff to begin working on implementation of a climate action plan, meaning I gave the staff more leeway in how they wanted to do that. It could be a consultant, it could be somebody else. And I would also point out that it wasn't that the budget committee voted no on that, it was that they didn't have 10 votes, which are required. I think the vote was 9-3 or 9-4 on that particular motion. So more people voted yes than voted no. It was just that it didn't reach the artificial 10. So that's number one. Number two, all these things need to be integrated into all the various plans we have. And I believe Director Wright spoke to that at some length at the Budget Committee. But to me, we need to do something. And we need to demonstrate that we, in fact, are going to be moving forward on this, which is why I asked Mr. Carver about what other things could be done. And I referenced one, which is the library construction, solar panels on it. He discussed charging stations, not just for city cars, but we could set up a charging station in the various parking garages. We could do something that shows the people, the city, that we are interested in moving forward on this.
And there's a whole list of those we could talk about over time, those we've done and
Yes.
have been doing since
Yes.
2006.
Yeah.
And
So,
I think there's a misunderstanding.
I agree with you, Mr. Mayor, and part of that is we haven't gotten things out, and maybe that could be used for some sort of publicity campaign, or saying, what other suggestions do you people, citizens, have that we could do?
I'm going to have the manager speak to this, okay?
As council is considering this amendment, I do want to share with you that I've discussed with staff, and we will be launching what I'm calling a performance audit of city operations and existing regulations, what Salem has done regarding climate action, and measures that we know of those actions, and we will be doing that in consultation and review with other comparable cities' plans. So we will be providing that information to council. We expect it'll take us about 6 months to complete, and we'll report back to council. And that is separate, which I'm sharing it now because I think is pertinent to the 50,000. This is separate from that $50,000 amount.
I appreciate that, Mr. Manager. I've heard so many misrepresentations of Salem and its environmental action and the kinds of programs we have going, this suggestion that somehow we're way behind the 8 ball. We're not. It's just not true. But it hasn't been labeled correctly. Apparently there is a label you need to have on this stuff. So I think that's why I'm interested in Councilor Anderson's motion is just using the label will make a lot of people happy. It doesn't matter what we're doing, it's just say it. Councilor Kaiser.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think some other confusion comes into play when we talk about Salem. And before, kind of what the city manager was just talking about doing some kind of audit, we're talking about the city of Salem, the city government and our operations. And the climate action plan is really targeting the city as community, Salem, the community at large, not just the city of Salem. So I think that's where it's been obfuscated in the past as well. So I think this will help add clarification that it's the whole community we're looking at.
Councilor Lewis.
I'm going to have to confess that I'm confused by the motion. I thought the goal was to get a climate action plan like other cities in Oregon have. It sounds more like we are looking at skipping the plan process and moving into implementation. And I mean, if we're going to do this, shouldn't the plan come first?
Councilor Nanke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I was going to go a lot of places you were going as well. We've had an environmental action plan in place for many, many years. And as part of that, there's energy conservation measures that we take. Energy is synonymous with carbon dioxide emissions. There's a direct correlation between the two. We have been reducing it. I've been working on those plans inside of industry, reducing it as well. I prefer to call it energy conservation instead. But it sounds like there are just people who will not stop until we say, why don't we just rename our environmental action plan then to climate action plan with other environmental benefits in the other areas of environmental science. You know, the director spoke to the fact that we're trying to put together, and the majority of those emissions are coming out of the transportation system, and that is what our Salem project is actually doing. So throwing $50,000 to try to do something over and above that process, we're spending a ton of money there already. It just seems illogical to me. If you want a plan to sit on a shelf, make a separate plan called the Climate Action Plan, and we'll still have our Environmental Action Plan. And when the policymakers of this body change, which plan do you think is going to sit on a shelf? Rather than incorporating it and making a comprehensive approach to just how we deal with the environment in general. So I'm in opposition to the motion on the floor.
Thank you. Councilor Kaiser.
Thanks. If I could just respond to Councilor Nanke's comment, the environmental action plan, as I understand it, is really just for the city of Salem, for city operations. It's not for the community. So but the city can do specific operationally to reduce our environmental impact. So the difference between that and a climate action plan is climate action plan would be for the entire community.
But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about something else. We're talking about a label, a $50,000 label, right?
To work towards a climate action plan.
Okay.
Yep.
Councilor Anderson.
I would like to have more money than this, but this was the amount that was suggested by 350. We need to do something, and to me, it's a compromise because we are in a budgetary, not emergency, but we have concerns about how we're going to go forward on the budget. And I note the city manager's comment on attachment 2, speaking to all three of the various, the other two items that were in there. Adding up to $334,000 is a comparatively small adjustment to the challenge facing the city in 2021 in terms of, you know, this will not be the straw that breaks the city's back on this. And I think it's been, this is more in response now to Councilor Lewis, I think it's been pretty clear that we aren't going to have to reinvent the wheel, and it would be, I would guess, and I'm looking at Director Wright right now, that we can spend staff time going to the other cities and saying, what was the low-hanging fruit that you picked off and that you could do? And we clearly have shown the aim and overall policy of the council by adding an environmental action plan to part of our Salem and to the long-term things that both the mayor and Councilor Nanke has spoken. So I don't think it would, we have to wait for an entire outline plan to begin moving forward to achieve those goals by some of the easier projects that could be done, and that's where I see the 50,000 seed money coming in.
Councilor Hoy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a procedural question. Are we going to deal with each one of these amendments individually, or are we stacking them all and then dealing with
We're
them?
going to do them one at a time.
So you don't want another one yet?
Nope, not yet. We may stack, but not yet. Councilor Nanke?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Knowing that there may be other amendments, I'll make my comments now and not as any of the other amendments come in regards to just the dire nature of where we are in a budgetary position right now. We actually spent $9 million in contingency. Some of that was working capital. Some was programmed in. But to balance the budget, it's $4 million. And we talk about a small adjustment. No, the small adjustment, if you add in all of those other items, equate to another 7 to 8% of that 400 or the 4 million that we're taking out of ending fund balance. With that, I would have a question for the city manager, because we've talked about revenue. We'll be talking about revenue coming up soon. It's a heavy lift to try to get this community to fund the amount of money we need based on some of the bond measures and what have been out there currently. So say we have no additional revenue for next year. What are we talking about as far as potential cuts from the current general fund budget?
The reality of the general fund, and that's where the pressure,
correct,
the fiscal pressure exists, is really public safety related programs and continued, because I know it is starting in this proposed budget, but certainly continued review of our ability to sustain discretionary programs or funding toward discretionary programs that exist in Salem. I'm hesitant to give specific examples. I can for the 24th, but certainly the areas of public safety, police, fire, and those programs where we're providing either complete support or contributing to the support of programs would be at risk.
Let me ask a clarifying question then. We supplemented this year's general fund budget with $4 million from working capital, and we are now underneath council's recommended policy on what that working capital reserve should be, correct?
Correct.
So knowing next year we have two choices. We take another $4 million and dive seriously below what our prudent reserve is, in my opinion, or we cut $4 million from the budget.
Or some combination of those two scenarios, yes.
And just to clarify, our budgetary, since everything that we're looking at here, with the exception of possibly a standalone climate action plan, are all recurring ongoing charges, which will double the amount of cut that would need to be made next year if we chose to continue those programs.
The other two are what I would consider recurring, yes.
Okay.
Recurring expenditures, yes.
And with that, I can't go any more. I'm actually very dissatisfied that we cut $4 million out of that working capital. I know there's a lot of people who are looking at the promise of future revenue coming in, but until I see that bird in my hand, everything in excess that we spend of this is additional cuts that would have to be made next year outside of actually having additional revenue. And I can't do that on the hopes of something that may very well not transpire.
Councillor Cook.
Follow-up for Councillor Ninke. You talked about the hope of
Talk through me, Dana. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A question as far as the hope. I believe that work is in front of us, seeking to broaden and diversify revenue sources for the city, as was discussed in both the Sustainable Revenue Task Force and also at Budget Limited-wise, that this is work that's in front of us, whether or not we choose to participate in it. It's something that has been laid in front of us, so it's our choice whether or not we pick it up and go.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Lewis.
I just want to make sure it's still a time that we can ask questions of staff.
Go ahead.
Okay. And I hate to push on this, but I think this is to Mr. Wright, the Climate Action Plan. I want to talk about, and they're all different, but I want to talk about Climate Action Plan. And it's my understanding from the Budget Committee meetings that the staff has talked to other cities that have climate action plans, and that you have an estimate, at least a rough estimate, of how much it would cost the City of Salem to create a climate action plan. And I'd like to have the answer, the financial answer to that question, and I hope that that would include staff time, not just consultants, but what would be the cost to the City of Salem to get and have a climate action plan?
Yeah, so Councilor Lewis, Norman Wright, Community Development Director. The initial cost for consulting alone for this sort of plan is $125,000. That is the estimate that's been provided to us from almost a year ago now, but it's still a very reliable estimate. That does not include staff time. It's difficult for me to estimate staff time because there's the whole matter of figuring out the scope of the project and thus the real weight of that on staff. If a significant amount of this can be put as far as engagement in the hands of a consultant, it lowers our cost significantly. Otherwise, those costs can climb very highly. But I would say, as a rough ballpark, $125,000 for the consultant, certainly, and probably 75% of that amount as well for staff time, which, again, could be adjusted based on scope.
If I could follow up.
Sure.
I lost my train of thought.
I have a question for Director.
Should we come back? Councillor Cook?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Director Wright, how do we make sure that the whole community is benefiting from the work of our Salem, and that there's some accountability measures within our Salem to account for actionable steps surrounding climate change?
Yeah, so first, when it comes to involving the whole community, okay, sorry. First, when it comes to involving the whole community, our phase 2, which was reported and a part of the agenda tonight, is being developed right now with our consultants. And once that begins, hopefully in August, perhaps even late July, we intend on this being a 15-month process at least, I'm sure, in order to engage with every possible stakeholder and concerned group throughout the city, all four corners, if you will, and certainly with the help and guidance of others, partners such as Willamette University. I think we'll even be able to reach those underrepresented groups in ways that we haven't been able to in the past. We feel very confident about the engagement component itself. And then in regards to measured impacts and that accountability factor, the report that we produced recently that was a part of phase 1 includes that report card. And if you've had the chance to see it, we've done our best to share it wherever we can. You'll see that there are measures that are highlighted in green, measures highlighted in red, measures highlighted in orange. When we get into phase 2 and the actual visioning, an important part of that visioning process is the scenario planning that takes place. And so what happens in the scenario planning is as people start to help us devise a new future for the city, how we're going to grow, how we're going to develop, the scenario planning tool then projects the expected impact based on the same model that we've already been using in phase 1 and helps us understand just what those impacts would be in a measurable effect so that we could see what for instance, what any particular growth scenario does for everything from measures for traffic, measures for greenhouse gas emissions, measures for even perhaps for jobs. So it's a very holistic tool, and that accountability measure comes into play to the best that we can in a planning project by helping us understand the true impact, again, projected, but the impact that we see on every one of those measures, particularly including all the measures related to climate. At last count, when we presented a few weeks ago at Budget Committee, that included as many as, I want to say, 12 of the measures, especially greenhouse gas emissions.
A follow-up, if I may,
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor. As far as the long-range community planner position as a additional amendment, my question is how long has that position been vacant? And if you have any idea as to...
Are we on the long-range planner? That's coming up.
Okay, my apologies.
Hold off on that. Okay, Councilor Anderson.
Let me try to look at this from the other end of the telescope, or maybe it's the other end of the binoculars, because I don't think it's that long of a stretch. If you were given $50,000 to begin implementation of a climate action plan, you wouldn't turn it down, would you?
We serve at council's direction.
Okay, and if you were given that money, you would find ways to utilize it in moving forward on a climate action plan.
We've worked very closely with the city manager to come up with creative solutions on how we can address those needs.
Thanks.
Very good. Councilor Lewis.
Yeah, I remember my question, but a comment, just a general comment as we go along. We all received correspondence from Mr. Hines and his objection to basically spending money on things that would help the climate, and trees would do that. Because the objection was strongly, we want a climate action plan. And I think it's important not to spend money on implementation before you have the plan. I did remember my question. Right now, the current budget calls for the elimination of the long-term planner that's currently vacant. Assuming...
I was going to say, you get to ask that question, and I don't. That's okay.
Well,
Okay, let's let Lewis ask his question.
Yeah, and
Let's get
actually,
an
because
answer, and then we're going to vote.
the two are connected.
Get yourselves ready.
The two are connected. If you're going to spend staff time on a climate action plan, I'm assuming it's going to be a planner. So my question is, assuming that position remains vacant, what would be the effect on your planning staff when it comes to balancing working on the climate action plan and working on our Salem, or could you do both?
It's difficult to know the real impact on our one planner that will remain as proposed, which is Eunice Kim. She leads the Our Salem project, but one important thing that, again, working with the city manager that we've been developing is an enterprise approach where not only do we rely on specialists, but we rely on all available resources, partnerships, collaborations with all of the departments across the city, Public Works being a specific example, as well as HR and Fleet, UD, well, everyone around this table with me. So as far as the impact, we'll find a way. I feel confident about that as the director of CD, particularly in collaboration with my fellow directors.
Okay, the motion on the table is from Councilor Anderson. A climate action plan for $50,000 is added to the budget.
Yeah.
Okay? What do you want to do?
I want to do a substitute motion.
Okay.
You know, I move that the city manager add $125,000 to the budget so the city can produce a climate action plan.
Okay. No second, we'll move back to $50,000. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed?
No.
Who's my nays? Three. Cook? Four. Cook, Lewis, Nanki, and Young. Okay. Motion passes. Okay, Counselor Kaiser.
I move an amendment to add an appropriation of $108,000 for long-range community planning.
Second.
If I could speak really quick to the motion.
Yes.
I think we only have one long-range planner right now, and I think cutting the second position is a bit short-sighted. I think that's a terribly important position that we need, especially with a city of our size, and I think we need that position. We need planners, especially with our Salem going on, especially with Climate Action Plan. We have a lot of projects, and we need that attention on it.
I just wanted to speak to Councilor Kaiser's motion as well, and thank you for making it. The situation's so complex that people are bringing up, whether it's our immediate needs with flooding and fire or the impact of climate change, and it's so pervasive in how it affects people in the Salem region. We really have to be resourceful as to how we're addressing things. And projects are so fragmented, it feels like there's no single intervention that can meet those needs, which is why that long-term comprehensive plan overhaul is so vital and important. In the city manager's report this last week, they talked about how the amount of development and growth that's happening in the region surpassed last year's. So Mr. Fong had mentioned the elephant in the room of the algal bloom last year. There's also the elephant of the room of the beat goes on. Development's happening, people are moving here, and if we're not able to accommodate that vision for complete neighborhoods, for transportation networks, we will be caught off guard. So I really think it's important that we not take our eye on the ball on that. Systems are designed for results, and our long-term comprehensive plan, before it's updated, is designed to deliver these specific results. It's really important that we not take our eye off of this long-term comprehensive planning, that we not limit the options of staff to be able to give them the tools they need to do the work in this situation. That being said, I do have a question for Director Wright. How long has that position been vacant? And do you have any idea as to whether or not we could allow the funding for this to go forward and still have a vacant position?
The second part of the question I may need a little help with just to understand it. The first part, how long has it been vacant? The position's been vacant for all of this fiscal year. Could you help me with the second part of the question, though?
So we passed the budget tonight, and we allow $108,000 for a long-term comprehensive planner position to help Eunice and be her counterpart. And next year we come back to reevaluate, and we still don't have a long-term comprehensive planner in that position. It's still vacant for whatever reason.
Well, if I may, Counselor, we no longer carry empty positions to carry empty positions. If Council authorizes a staffing level, we will be filling those positions.
Okay, let's move on. Who else has a question? Comment? Counselor DeYoung.
Thank you. So to kind of follow up on Councilor Cook's question, if let's say that this particular appropriation was passed, what would be your time frame in terms of hiring a second long-range community planner?
Yeah, to just further extend on the city manager's own guidance, we would post as soon as the budget is effective, is my expectation.
Okay, Counselor Lewis.
Two things that caused me to be not in favor of the motion. One is, just a few minutes ago, we heard Director Wright say that he could make it work with his staff in doing our Salem and a climate action plan. Now, we're going to be taking some climate action, but it's not going to be the full-blown plan. And so I take him at his word that his staff can handle it. Secondly, This is a position that I strongly believe should stay vacant for another year, and depending on where the Revenue Task Force information or recommendations go, the issue could be addressed again next year, but I would just as soon wait on this position until we have funding to actually pay for it.
Councilor Ossick.
Well, I just wanted to mention that when we were going through the neighborhood association planning, that like with Lansing, we had multiple planners there helping just for a small neighborhood plan. So the thinking for me is that if we're doing this massive comprehensive Salem, having the two folks working together and being able to cover all the different meetings and meeting with all the different stakeholders would be invaluable. So I feel like we might be able to patch something, like work to a good enough, but we could probably do, if we're going to do something this big and this extensive, we should put our best effort towards it, and I think having another planner would help that.
Okay. Okay. Oh, sorry, Councilor Young.
Thank you. So another follow-up question in terms of other cities, like for example, Portland and some of the other ones. Do you know how many long-range community planners are employed in those respective cities?
I don't know off the top of my head, but it's more than 2. by a fair margin.
And it's working pretty good for them. Okay. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Nay.
3 nays. Okay, motion passes. All righty, what's our next one? All righty, you ready to vote on the budget as amended?
Amendment?
Yeah.
Okay.
You got one?
Yeah,
Well,
I got
put her
one.
on the table.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move for an appropriation of $176,640 for youth development position. The appropriation would reinstate the program coordinator position, supporting materials, expenses, and grants to collaborating organizations.
Second by Kaiser.
I can speak to my motion. I wholeheartedly understand and share Raquel Moore Green's concerns about dipping into working capital for expenses and to honor the commitment of the Budget Committee to move forward with a sustainable plan. However, I think we need to look at our commitment to the community. In the case of this youth development position, we have made a commitment to our youth and we've made a commitment to our community to carry forward with this very important work, building collaborations, tapping community resources. And this fund, especially with the grants, it looks like a drop in the bucket, but you're able to get over 10% yield or 10 times the yield, as Lori demonstrated with her presentation. Also, I did have a question for staff in regards to this position. If we let it lapse 1 year, as has been suggested with other things, let's wait, let's get a plan down, let's drop it until we can find another secure funding, I believe would not only cause a stumble of faith within the community, but it would require more work to start up again because you'll lose the momentum. So my question to staff is kind of along those lines as well, to see what that anticipated added expenses would be if we didn't have continuation of this commitment and continuation of this program.
So then, the question sounds like Councilor Cook, what would be the additional startup costs if we were to resume in a later year? It's very difficult for me to say. I just don't know. As it stands now, the program certainly is effective for all the reasons that council has provided, and that's with the funding that it has. The real startup success is entirely dependent upon the person that is hired for the position, more so than any additional funding that is a part of the program, for all the leveraging that the person does. So I can't say that there would be any additional startup costs if it were to resume in later years, other than just the program costs as we know them today.
Okay. Do you have more questions? Okay. Anyone else? Councilor Anderson.
And this, I guess, is in response to sort of overall on all three of the motions. And Councilor Nanke made some good, appropriate remarks about our concerns with the budget and everything else, and so did Ms. Moore Green when she testified. And I recall way back in an earlier council meeting, Councilor Lewis talked about mortal sins and venal sins, which I'm not sure, not being Catholic, but I am a Protestant, and I would quote Martin Luther, who said, "Sin boldly." So my view of this is, these are good programs. They ought to be, all ought to be supported, and we'll do what we can, and we have to have some sort of faith in the staff and the community that we're going to be able to fund these as we move forward.
Really?
We could talk a whole lot about theology, but
I
that's
just thought I'd
enough.
ask that question.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we know that doesn't work that way. We're 4 million down again. You know, we're still driving into the hole. I think that might be the thing that Councilor Nanke's trying to
Yeah,
get
and
us to
it's just taking that extra burden over and above the recommended budget for this year. And we know where the cuts tend to come.
It's
And
cops and fire, let's be honest.
well, or libraries are going to be shut down for a couple of extra days. How much is, $326,000? What does that take out of next year when you look at the potential for no increased revenue? It's taking something else that the community expects as a service, and it's being financially irresponsible to say, we're going to just gut it out for one more year and give you that program, and we're going to cut 2 programs next year.
I think part of it is having been through this.
That's
the
I mean,
part
it comes
that-
back to that first story. My very first year at council, I voted to open the library on Monday again, and the next year I made the motion to close it. And what did that do? It wasted a year's worth of money. We did that with the police station or the fire station in West Salem. We said, let's take it up to 24/7 when the chief at the time said 40 is good enough for right now. And what was the expenditure? And we shut down that fire station and another one the next year. So we need to be conscious of future impacts of budgetary decisions we make today, knowing that in our hearts, all of us care about what the heck happens here. And we're trying to do our best. But sometimes when we try to do our best for an emotional reason, logic catches us next year, and it's like, oh my God, what have we done? So just to look at, until there's guaranteed revenue, we're going to double cut that next year. So, not a happy time.
Well, if you haven't been through it, it won't make sense to you, but that's exactly what's going to happen. Councilor Lewis?
Okay, just for clarification. A venial sin, you'll get a couple of Our Fathers and a couple of Hail Marys. A mortal sin, you got to do the whole rosary.
Okay, if I may. Perfect. So I think it's important, with respect to my fellow counselors, in speaking to this is about commitment. And in talking about the consequences and the sacrifices that have been brought up in the discussion, it's important to remember that our hands are not tied. We are the policymaking and the decision body council. So what moves people to act? Is it data? Is it a message that's compelling? Is it achievable actions? In this case, with this work, it's not a mystery, and it's not a closed system. I would argue that we need to be cautious about making false choices, because this is not an either-or situation. This is maintaining a commitment that we have watered the seed. It has been planted and it is growing. And now we're talking about abandoning not only a goal, not only something that was brought up in our strategic planning and in our outreach and helps meet those particular patterns, but eliminating the ability to leverage the work that we're doing out in the community with these partners, eliminating that ability to maintain that outward-facing work. So I would just be cautious and remember who benefits, who's burdened, and who's at the table in these decisions. People from all different backgrounds have different needs to be able to live healthy, productive lives. And we may not be able to have these single targeted interventions for everybody, but this is the outcome-based programming that delivers systems-level, outcome-based change.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed?
No.
Hands up. Nanki and Lewis. Motion passes. Okay, we're down to the one more. Yes, Councilor Case.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe this is the right time to do this, but I'll just make the amendment. I move that funds from the 2008 Streets and Bridges Bond allocated for Marine Drive be used to acquire right-of-way for Marine Drive between 5th Avenue Northwest and Riverbend Road Northwest.
Second by Anderson.
And if I could speak very quickly, I think the alignment of Marine Drive between Glen Creek and Cameo is extremely controversial, especially to construct that segment. I think anything north of that really is not, as far as I can tell, we're in agreement that we need to acquire that right-of-way. I'd rather start acquiring right-of-way in the areas where we do have agreement rather than in areas where we don't. So I think we've sat on this for a couple of years. I think it makes sense to move forward.
Okay, Councilor Lewis.
Yeah, there's absolutely no way I could support the motion. It's been over 20 years that this street has been planned, and its purpose is crystal clear. Crystal clear. But yet, the motion would propose a transportation system that does not do, absolutely not do, what it's supposed to be doing. And the situation in West Salem now is critical. Wallace Road is the road. And if there's no other option, that road will become impassable. I strongly object to changing something that's been in the transportation plan for over 20 years because some people, not all, but some people don't want it along the park.
Councilor Case.
Just quickly respond. I just want to make a note that this alignment is in the TSP.
The transportation plan clearly shows Marine Drive from Glen Creek north. That's what's in the plan. You're talking about something different.
I want to track that just for a moment. Is this part of that TSP, or is this, we're just not picking up the Glen Creek up?
My understanding is that both of these alignments are in the TSP.
Okay, so.
And so this is just committing to the one where there's not the controversy, there's not is it aligned along the park or not? It's picking up the other segment and everything north of there to Riverbend.
So next year we could do Glen Creek.
You could, yep.
To this, to connect it up.
It essentially, the difference between I think what Councilor Lewis wants which is the construction, the actual construction of Marine Drive between Glen Creek and Cameo. The difference is that this acquires right-of-way along the alignment between 5th and Riverbend Road.
It's my understanding that the transportation plan has one alignment for Marine Drive, and it includes the loop around to 5th Avenue. So there's not two plans, there's one. And to break it apart, I think, makes no sense. The connectivity is completely different if we stop at 5th Street. And to exclude the idea of moving forward from Glen Creek to Cameo makes no sense. Makes no sense at all. At least from somebody who lives there.
I just want to check, Councilor Lewis, with you. If the votes don't exist to do the full alignment, and you can get part of the alignment into a right-of-way bank, that seems to be what the councilor is proposing. Am I misunderstanding her? She's looking at part of it. She's saying, let's get this in. It has the votes. We can move it forward tonight. Or we can sit another year because it won't have the votes if we move back into the park, if I understand that correctly, what she's kind of proposing.
Am
I missing it?
It's my understanding.
Okay.
that staff is now going through the process of inquiring about right-of-way. To limit that to just the part of Marine Drive north of Fifth Street is objectionable.
But it is part of the long-term plan for Marine Drive, and it is the one that has the votes tonight to move forward. Do I understand that correctly? And if we tried to extend the whole thing back to Glen Creek or wherever, you know, it suddenly doesn't have enough votes to move forward. And we would just sit on that money, at $3.8 million that have been sitting there for over 20 years, or around 20 years, and not accomplish anything. This gets us moving forward on Marine Drive, which I think is your goal. No? Not buying that one? Just so I try it out, Councilor Nate.
And yeah, the money hasn't been sitting around since then. The plan has. Money's been there since Streets and Bridges bond measure.
That's right.
Almost. And in that light, you know, staff's going to try to get us right away. If a development wants to go in, they will give us that right of way. And that's where it's like, yeah, buy my right of way. Then I don't have to give that to you when I actually develop and build a road on it and dedicate that roadway to you either. So I want them to be able to be as strategic as possible on which properties, the ones that may be developing and will cost us a lot more to buy down the road if we have to, you know, condemn a building as well. And so I prefer them to have as much latitude knowing which properties may develop next versus which properties they may want to actually redevelop and stick something new on it that would have to be torn down again in the event of street construction.
And that's why Fernandez does what he does, is he knows how to do that kind of
But we just cut off a big chunk of that potential right-of-way.
Well, a chunk. This is north to Riverbend if it wants to be. I mean, that's what I want to understand. Are we missing a real opportunity here to go in and buy some property we're going to have in the future and use those funds? Help me out here, Peter. I want to understand this better. I want to hear what.
Well, we'll ultimately buy whatever the council directs us to buy.
Well, you're not going to buy stuff we'd get for free, would you?
No, we're not going to buy stuff that we could possibly get for free. Once we send a letter out, you know, people will, you know, those that want to sell will sell, and that's what we have suggested to council. If something like this amendment moves through, regardless of what piece we are directed to do, we will send out letters and say, whoever wants to sell, we're ready to purchase.
Are prices going down over the next few years while we wait to get?
Well, that's hard to say. You know, the yield curve has inverted, so we could see a recession within the next 2 years.
Is that your prediction now?
That's just facts.
Councilor Lewis.
Yeah, I want to be clear. I don't have any objection at all purchasing right-of-way from 5th and Cameo North. That's not the issue. My issue is excluding the direction to staff to also look at purchasing right-of-way from Cameo south to Glen Creek. So.
Okay. Well, I'm not voting to exclude. I'm just voting for the phase that the councilor has proposed, is all I'm voting for. Okay. All those in... No.
You are voting to exclude staff from looking into purchasing right-of-way from Cameo south to Glen Creek with this motion. They are being told to focus on purchasing right-of-way from 5th and Cameo north only, and that's the objection.
Which is what will have enough votes to move forward, and if it is from Glen Creek forward, you're not buying anything this year. You're just hoping that Fernandez is right, that property's going to decrease in value. Okay. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed?
No.
Raise your hand. Nikki, Lewis, are you a no?
You bet.
Okay. Okay, motion passes. Now, we're back to the main motion. All those in favor of moving this forward to City Council for action? We're moving the amended city budget forward. You all know what you've been voting on. I hope. So, you ready? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed?
No.
Louis Nanke, no. Motion passes. Okay.
Now, what we really need to know is who's not going to be here next meeting.
Oh, is that the 24th?
Yeah.
I won't be there.
Is there going to be more than 5?
Okay, Councilor Hoy. No, Councilor Anderson, you pulled 3.2C under special orders of business.
I move the staff recommendation on Resolution 2019-18.
Second by Kaiser.
I'll just speak briefly to this. I brought this to the attention of the council through SHA meeting either last, I think 2 meetings ago, and suggested that we should file a resolution saying, for all the reasons, I think this is a good resolution. I'm not going to repeat it all, but essentially what's happened is HUD has decreased, and eliminated various programs and funding, which makes it very hard for us at this local end to do anything about affordable housing and housing for the homeless. And I suggested that we express our concern about this. And I note that the recommendation says communicate position to Senators Wyden, Merkley, and Congressman Schrader. I would also ask that we communicate this to Department of Housing and Urban Development as well.
Good. All righty, thank you. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed, motion passes. Councilor Hoy, you did
3.3C.
3.3C.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the City Council hold a work session on the first phase of the Our Salem project at a time indicated by the city manager.
Second by Anderson. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed, motion passes. Okay, we're to information reports. Lots of information.
Yes, there was.
Okay. We have no ordinances this evening. No further business. We are adjourned.